What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and today we're joined by a very special guest, Daniel Kelly, former professional NFL scout with the New York Jets. You can find him on Twitter at FirstRoundMock, and you can read all of his scouting reports and articles on FirstRoundMock.com. Dan, we're super happy to have you in today and talk about some of these quarterback prospects in the upcoming NFL draft. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing very well, Anthony and Alex. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's that time of year. It's time to get excited. It's draft season.
Yeah, it's draft season. I'm really excited. And we've been talking about all these quarterback prospects with the New York Giants. And of course, Daniel Jones, his injury, a lot of uncertainty surrounding his future. So on the channel, we've been having discussions about some of these quarterback prospects. So we're excited to get your insight on that. But before we dive into those individual prospects, I firstly just want to ask you about the scouting process, what it was like being an NFL scout, kind of how you grade, what do you look for in certain players, and really just what that process is like being in a front office and helping a general manager make those decisions.
Absolutely. Well, it's really intense, and there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of variables at all times. And the scouting process. When I was with the New York Jets, I was there in the regime under Bill Parcells. Bill Belichick was there at that time. Dick Haley, Mike Tannenbaum was very structured. In terms of what you look for. For example, Bill Parcells had what he called, when I was a pro personnel assistant in the pro scouting department, he had what was called critical factors of scouting. These were 6 characteristics that a player, a prospect, or college or pro had to have for Parcells to be interested in a player. One of those characteristics, for example, was a big one that stuck with me all these years. Is football important to him? That's huge because there's a lot of guys out there that maybe football isn't their first love. We've all seen it on Sundays, Mondays, Thursday nights, etc. And when the lights are the brightest, those guys kind of go into a shell. So that's one of the things. Also scouting, what I learned at the Jets, and this was really eye-opening for me. The saying around the building was, we're in the information gathering business. Gather it, but never give it, was the kind of the inside joke. And what that means is that the Jets and Parcells and Belichick and that regime, and of course the disciples that came from that tree, a lot of it is very information gathering intensive. So like, for example, as a pro personnel assistant, the first 2 years, one of my main functions at the Jets was Scott Pioli was my direct boss at the pro. He was a pro scouting director at the time, Bill Parcells' son-in-law. Every morning he would, come into my office and my little desk area, I should say. I didn't have an office, but I was in there with JoJo Wooden, who was the interim GM recently of the Chargers, etc. One of my functions was, he'd give me a stack of papers. It was about 3 inches thick every morning, and he had a bunch of pertinent information highlighted. And when I first got to the Jets, guys, I was like one of those typers. It was one finger at a time. When I left, I was typing 90 words a minute. That's how intensive it was. You do not go home until the information's in the system. It could be anything from, this guy got DWI, to this guy tweaked a hamstring, to this guy, had a domestic issue, to this guy was arrested for drugs. It could be anything under the sun, everything we all read in the sports publications. And so that was a big part of it. So what they did was they kind of married the two. They married the tape, the game film, to the information that was out there to come up with, and then they had, 3-4 weeks of pre-draft meetings. They went to all the different events. We all see the Senior Bowl, the Combine, the Pro Days. Getting inside a player's head was critically important. The old saying in scouting is the game is won or lost from the neck up. And that's a big one. And so they really wanted to get into the psychology. And we had people on staff that were expert psychologists. Guys who are experts at, reading body language. They always say that, if a person's mouth can say anything, but you watch their body language, that's what they were doing. It was extremely intensive. Our security director at the time was Steve Yarnell, who was like the lead investigating person from the FBI from the 1993 Trade Center bombing. I mean, we had, like, when I say experts, I mean, we had experts, and they would read everything. They would ask these prospects, hey, what's your favorite soft drink? To give them a couple warm-ups like we see in the police interrogation rooms, on TV. Where'd you go to school? Have you ever tried drugs before? So I mean, those are really intense. And then everybody's just staring at the guy, eye contact, body movement. Is he fidgeting? What's his eyes look like? Movement. Is he looking at us? Is he looking at the floor? All things that they would look at. So it's an extremely intensive process. And really and truly, there's more variables that go into this and picking the winning Powerball numbers because there's so many moving parts. And then, the last line of the equation is, how is this guy going to respond when we put millions of dollars in his pocket? We can see that a little bit more now with the NIL. We can see how guys respond with money, but it's still a variable because they're coming into a situation where the game's a lot faster. They hit a lot harder. There's a lot more pressure, a lot more expectations. They really want to do the homework from the neck up.
Absolutely. I think that's really great insight into like what we're looking for in individual players. And I think, it's obviously we're not getting all the information on the outside, looking towards what the front office is actually doing, especially for the Giants. We've had so many different characters, whether it be, avoiding social media, on social media. I'm sure that's a big variable now in the equation, how active they are on social media, what they're posting.
Absolutely.
Giants tend to like quarterbacks that don't have social media. So that's definitely something to consider in the equation here. But, with the Senior Bowl coming up, what is the importance, do you think? Obviously, the Giants have some coaches actually involved this year, and the importance of the Senior Bowl. There's more players there this year as well. Getting eyes on those guys, how they interact on the sideline. Are they congratulating after a touchdown? Those little tiny details. How important is it for the Giants coaches in this instance to be there and getting their eyes on the field, not just, kind of interrogating them behind the scenes?
Great question, Alex. I've been to the Senior Bowl twice, and I've had a chance to walk down on the field and be around the coaches and sit in the stands around GMs and so forth. And really, this is the first opportunity for NFL personnel, besides the scouts to go to the schools and walk around practice and college campuses. This is really the first chance a lot of GMs, head coaches, decision makers, let's put it, on teams, owners, have a chance to actually stand on the field and watch the guy, opposed to just watching what the TV cameras show or what certain outlets will report. They actually can watch these guys up close and personal. You can see a lot about these players, and really this whole offseason, this whole dance between now and the draft is these events that you're talking about, Alex. They're really a chance. Hopefully teams have done the film work at this point. That's what I'm working on. It takes a good 10 to 11 months to set a draft board. Hopefully they're just about that point where the reports are in the system. Now we're seeing how these guys respond, and not just respond to outlandish questions or in an attempt to try to get the most authentic answer, but also how they respond to working with different personnel. For example, a lot of times, these guys are always working with the same receivers. Okay, how are they going to work with different receivers? So it's a chance to see how they respond. NFL coaches, kind of, we'll do NFL drills at the Senior Bowl that, kind of bring them up to speed to see how these guys respond to drills, going through drills, running through drills, how they look going through the drills. And so they're really watching the body language, how they work, how they interact with different players is huge. Is this guy just standing off? Is this a quarterback, for example, right? Is he just kind of standing off by himself, kind of aloof? Not really involved, guys don't really respond that well to him, peers and stuff, or is it a guy that's really, hey guys, let's go, let's get it fired up here. Let's go. Is he a guy that's motivating people? They're looking for those type of characteristics too, because they're really, truly, game film trumps everything in this process. But you're really looking too for different tells. It's like a game of poker. You're looking for how teammates respond, how they respond, how the process is going, and how they answer questions. Do they seem like they're built for the bright lights? We're kind of getting brighter lights now in the NFL. How do they respond to the press? I remember Tim Tebow, for example. Everything was no sir, yes sir, no ma'am, yes ma'am. How do they respond is a big part of this process, and of course moving into the pro days and the combine as well.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the players that we're keeping a close eye on, I know that you and I, Dan, were kind of talking a little bit on Twitter about him. I want to get your take on Jayden Daniels. And this is where I'll cue Alex in, because Alex is a big Jayden Daniels guy. Like, he's very high on him. I know you and I were messaging and we said he reminds both of us of Tyrod Taylor, and I know Alex shares the same opinion. So I think that's something that Giants fans could be excited about with how he might fill in there. But Alex, I'll let you take it away and kind of pick Dan's brain a little bit here on Jayden Daniels as one of the top quarterback prospects in this class.
Yeah, so I'm a big Jayden Daniels fan for the simple fact that I think he fits what we run in New York really well. You saw the success we had by Tyrod Taylor, and you kind of mentioned earlier the variables of does he love football, the kind of mental aspects, and everything that I've seen up to this point suggests that Jayden Daniels is the first one in and the last one out. He's doing all the work. We saw the improvement he had last year. As a deep ball thrower, and at Arizona, he was kind of a check down merchant, and then he developed that deep ball, which I really like to see him kind of putting it together into more of a complete package. The legs, the mobility, it kind of gives me that idea that if the Giants or any team is able to get him a little bit more comfortable with his mobility in the pocket, he could have that Lamar Jackson-esque style in terms of being able to manipulate the pocket, get behind his blockers, and use that to buy time. Oftentimes his head will drop and he'll take off running, and he won't try to extend the play through the air. That is a slight concern of mine, but also his frame, he's a little bit small in terms of his weight. Obviously, he could, use a little bit more poundage to maybe quell the concern of injury, but I do like his mental state. I do think he loves the game. You don't really see him that active on social media. He's kind of a humble dude, has that competitive nature on game day. He can do it against the best teams. Again, had a really good supporting cast at LSU, so it's hard to see, can he do it when the Giants' offensive line is falling apart? Who really knows? But, I'll ask you this. What is your take on Jayden Daniels, his upside? Because I think his upside is pretty substantial, but I think, there are concerns that need to be addressed, and, whatever team gets him is going to have to do a little bit of development there for sure.
Absolutely, Alex. That is, to me, one of the best breakdowns I've heard of Jayden Daniels out there, in the press, and that what you just said. I mean, that was nice and compact. It was right there, and all the things that you hit on, to me, do show up on game film. And to me, Jayden Daniels is and was one of the toughest evaluations I've ever done. Because all the things you're saying, I saw, but there's other things too. Now, I studied him during, I think, 21 games total dating back to ASU. And I'm the guy that came out when he was at ASU and said, hey, I take, and this is in 2021, right? When everybody was Trey Lance crazy. I said I would take Jayden Daniels over Trey Lance in 2021 on NFL Draft Diamonds. But Jayden Daniels, picking up where we left off, the frail, the thin, slender frame really concerns me. And it really concerns me. I know that, there's a lot of comp there to Lamar Jackson, and, he was the same size coming out of Louisville, et cetera. But it's not the frail size that concerns me. It's the aggressive physicality in which Jayden Daniels loves to run the ball. This guy's got the mentality of Derrick Henry. He wants, he'll duck out of bounds, he'll slide like he's, stealing second base once in a while. But by and large, this guy really wants to take somebody out. And we've all seen the plays. I've posted some of them. And so that's a concern because I saw what happened to RG3. In Washington, and same type of thing there. So that's all I can think of when I watch him. But the other things that concern me most about Jayden Daniels, sweet deep ball. Best deep ball thrower in the draft, no question. Great runner, best runner in the draft, no question. The things that concern me are him leading with an inconsistent tempo and rhythm. That's something I watch for. To me, quarterbacks are like drummers in a band. They set the rhythm and the tempo for the offense on every single play, including the timing, but the chemistry between the receivers and the quarterback. Inconsistent rhythm and tempo. Footwork in the pocket is really concerning to me about Jayden Daniels. This guy has what we call in scouting happy feet. He has a very hard time settling his feet in the pocket. That disturbs timing. A receiver has to know where to run, what point to run to, and where the ball is going to be. And he has very inconsistent rhythm. He seems very uncomfortable in the pocket. The last quarterback I saw this uncomfortable in the pocket was Kenny Pickett at Pitt. And, he seems uncomfortable. And you hit on it, Alex, like he has that propensity to take off and run instead of letting the pass play, right, develop. And that's what I saw in him was that, the first sign of pressure, he plays scared. He plays with a very high anxiety level, highest anxiety level I've ever seen in a quarterback, which is why I believe he stays so thin, is because he plays like, the first sign of pressure, boom, he's gone. And he'll take off running, of course, which increases the injury risk overall when he's off and running like that, which is something teams have to look at. And it's something too that, there's some mental lapses there, not a lot. I don't want anybody to jump off the show and start labeling the guy as anything, but there's some mental lapses. Sometimes he'll freeze in the pocket like a deer in headlights. Sometimes it causes him to hold the ball too long. Here's a huge concern. Now, obviously, it's an apple to oranges comparison, but, his time to throw is 2.91 seconds per PFF. If you look at Zach Wilson at Next Gen Stats, 2.91 seconds. This guy has the same time to throw as Zach Wilson. Of course, being New York fans, we all see how that worked out. And it's something where, of course, Giants and Jets, two different teams, but, it's something where he held the ball too long, which I feel helped him to manipulate college level defenses because it cleared out large areas for him to run into. You hold the ball for 4, 5, 6 seconds, all of a sudden there's huge green open areas of grass to run to. And, to me, it's like, okay, the big question, and this is how I would talk if I was sitting, with you guys, like if I was sitting in an NFL war room before the draft and I was called upon to answer these type of questions as a scout, I would say, okay, so then he's got this great athleticism and he can run like an Olympic runner, but yet he has taken 65 sacks over the last 2 seasons. That's a huge concern to me. 125 sacks or 129, I believe, in 5 seasons. So, to me, it's like, the high injury risk, the uncomfortability in the pocket. It's sometimes he throws short of the sticks as far as mental lapses are concerned on third downs on tape, and he can miss wide open targets because he's so focused on the home run and he's so focused on the pass rush that he misses wide open targets underneath sometimes. So I think you hit on a key word there, Alex, when you describe what you've seen in Jayden Daniels, and that is the developmental upside. I do believe he has strong developmental upside. I see him more. I have a 3rd round grade on him, which is exactly where teams used to take developmental quarterbacks, is somebody who would be an ideal backup quarterback in my mind, a guy you bring in and it provides that much needed spark when things are going wrong or something like that. But to me, like if you just bring in a Jayden Daniels and drop him into the situation, especially in New York, and you and I, Anthony, we're talking a little bit about the iconic quarterbacks that we've seen throughout the years, in New York, going back to Y.A. Tittle, Phil Simms, Joe Namath, Eli Manning, all these guys, throughout the years. This is a different place than if you guys, I'm sure you see it, right? It's a different place than, say, going to a team with a smaller market, maybe the Minnesota Vikings or something. I mean, this is a different type of market that demands production, demands, guys to step in and play at a high level. And that's why I think that a lot of these guys we've seen over the years have been more, they've made a few stops before they get the New York type of guys like a Vinny Testaverde and, Boomer Esiason and, guys like that. To me, it's like they're going to be asking a lot. The expectations are going to be really high. And I do not think Jayden Daniels is ready for the bright lights.
Yeah, I'll say on Jayden Daniels, I think the upside is there, as we've kind of all agreed. But he is a player that I think needs time and patience. And you make a good point there, Dan, in saying where in New York, there's not a lot of patience from the fan base. We've seen with the Giants ownership and general managers in the past, there hasn't been a lot of patience with letting players develop or letting coaches develop, even a lot of firings and hirings and refirings. So there's not a lot of patience in New York. And I think you make a good point in saying that, where if you look at Jayden Daniels as a guy who maybe needs a little bit more time to grow, he might not have as much time in the Big Apple as he would elsewhere, and that could hinder his success at the start of his career and ultimately in his career if things don't go as planned for, say, a Brian Daboll going into his 3rd season as head coach. So another thing that I want to ask you, though, because we're talking about the New York market and kind of how players play in it, I do want to get your take from 2019 on where you had Daniel Jones. I want to dive back into some of these quarterback prospects in this upcoming draft right afterwards. But Daniel Jones, how did you view him coming into that draft? And kind of where do you see things may have gone wrong so far in his career? And I also just want to know, like, are you a Daniel Jones believer? Do you think that he's still got enough in him to right the ship here for the Giants?
I do. I do actually. I'm gonna go on a limb because on social media prior to the 2022 season, I actually picked Daniel Jones as my comeback player of the year for the in the NFL. I did not evaluate Daniel Jones coming in out of college, but I did have an opportunity to evaluate Daniel Jones for a special scouting report that I did in an edition. Back then when they were the Washington Redskins in 2019, I interviewed with Bruce Allen, the president of the team, and I did all like the advanced scouting reports, kind of like trying to audition for the job between October and the time that he was ultimately let go. But I had a big grade on Daniel Jones, even from that standpoint in that report. To me, the thing about quarterbacks is that what I had the privilege of sitting next to Lee Steinberg once, the super agent that represents Patrick Mahomes, writing back from the Senior Bowl rather. I sat next to Lee Steinberg, and he and I got into this conversation from Mobile to Houston, and he's a king of quarterbacks. He's represented a lot of the top ones since the time I was little, and he said something very profound. He said, quarterbacks are like a fine wine. They take time to develop. And this is Lee Steinberg talking. And he said, unfortunately, a lot of teams, a lot of these guys, don't have that time. And he kind of pointed out, he referenced Rich Gannon. Rich Gannon was 37 years old when he became NFL MVP for the Raiders after bouncing around to the Vikings, Chiefs, Washington, finally ended up with the Raiders. And so to me, it's like, I don't think the Giants are ready to give up on Daniel Jones. I've given this a lot of thought, and I think that, I'm not sold that they're ready to move on from him at this point. I'm one of the few that probably feels that way in the market, especially after he signed that monster, extension, right? 4 years, $160 million, I believe it was. I mean, what it is drafting a quarterback in the first place is like getting married. Signing him to extension is like renewing the vows. You're you're really into it with a Daniel Jones type of guy, and I just don't know, especially with his contract. I mean, I think it's about 35, according to Spottrack.com, $35.5 million base in 2024, $47 million cap hit, $69 million. We're looking at dead cap space. 2025, the dead cap space lessens a little bit to 22 million in that area. But I think that, to me, I think the Giants might just be the type of franchise that says, especially if he's healthy enough, that's going to be the wild card, to your point, Anthony, coming off the injury and everything. If team doctors think that he can go, they might be willing to take an extra year and just say to ourselves, let's get a receiver. Let's get Brock Bowers in here. Let's see if that can't rebuild his confidence enough to the point where, the Giants, from a football DNA standpoint, are a very tight end rich franchise. If you look back at the Mark Navarros and the Jeremy Shockeys, and let's bring in Brock Bowers and see if, he's a dominant guy from a tight end position that is going to create a lot of mismatches. Brian Daboll loves mismatches. That's how he made his name for himself in Buffalo. Let's bring him in here and let's just see if we can't get something more out of Daniel Jones for another season. And if they can't, Brian Daboll's job is he's on the hot seat. Maybe next year they say, okay, let's cut, part ways with Daniel Jones, take the $22 million dead cap, space. I don't think any team's going to trade for a Daniel Jones. I just, no, it's not going to happen. So it's going to be a cap hit. And maybe next year they say, okay, especially if the Giants don't do well next year, they all of a sudden now they're in a top 5, top 10 situation again. And there's Jalen Milroe sitting there, or there's, somebody else sitting there that, maybe they want to go get. But I think there's one more year in the crystal ball for the New York Giants. That's my personal belief.
Yeah, so we've kind of gone back and forth on that before and come to the conclusion ourselves where we think that with Brian Daboll, back's kind of against the wall here. And so we
That's
almost
true
feel
too.
like the Giants might kind of force it and take a quarterback, even if they don't necessarily want to. They might just take one in order to like save their jobs in a way. So that's why we've been really diving into this quarterback position. And again, that kind of ties into what we were saying, the impatience in New York. They know that the last 3 head coaches have been fired after 2 seasons. So they got to get something done here in year 3. Otherwise, they could be fired too. So quarterback makes sense when you think about it from that perspective. And I want to segue that back into talking about this draft class's quarterbacks because I'm a big believer in Drake Maye. I think when you look back on the 2018 NFL draft, it's shades of Josh Allen for me with Drake Maye. I think that there's a lot of similarities in the way that they play the game, the way that they fit into an offense. And so for the New York Giants in particular, I really like Drake Maye as a fit with Brian Dable because of those Josh Allen similarities. And so I think even some of the same strengths and same weaknesses are shared between those two guys. A little bit of decision making can get a little too gutsy, some bad plays made worse by Drake Maye. But then I also think you see the strong arm, the arm talent, his ability to make the throws, pro throws. So I do like Drake Maye, but I want to hear your take on it because I know in recent weeks he's kind of been sliding in most people's draft stock. You haven't heard as much buzz around him as you have weeks ago or months ago, rather. So I do want to hear your take on Drake Maye and how you think he would fit in with Brian Dable and the Giants.
Yeah, absolutely, Anthony. I mean, a lot of great points you made there about Drake Maye, and he has been a favorite ever since he came into college football. I mean, the huge first year, the freshman year, and everything. And I've looked at Drake Maye in 26 games, and the bottom line, Bill Belichick always liked to say, you know what, we're in a bottom line business. Let's cut to the chase, type of thing. He would always say, and the bottom line is Drake Maye regressed in 2023 on game film. And I've watched every snap of Drake Maye in 2022 and 2023. I really like Drake Maye. I don't put big words on a lot of guys because for one, social media will use it. They'll put it on their dartboard, but I don't put big words on a lot of these guys. I put some big words on Drake Maye after 2022 game film. I mean, I put out a article that said he was giving off Tom Brady vibes. I talked a little bit about shades of Matt Ryan. I can see that in him, that business-like approach. There was a lot there. 2022, he was my QB2 coming into the season, the preseason grade that I had on him. And I'm just not as high. And a lot of people love Drake Maye. I mean, still 97.9% of last check of the NFL draft community see him as a first-round pick on NFLMockDraftDatabase.com. He's still a consensus top 5 pick in a lot of different major outlets out there. But there's some concerns that I had. You just need to be because from 30,000 feet, Maye, yeah, he looks. Hey, that's a franchise quarterback. You can make a poster of that guy, and that's the guy. Like you alluded to with Josh Allen, with Buffalo and stuff. But when I start to kind of put him under the microscope and look at him through what I call NFL colored glasses, to me, it's like, there's no question he's going to be a pro day star. This guy, I think he was even throwing passes to the last pro day at North Carolina. They loved him so much, and scouts wanted to see him. But there's about half his games in 2022 on film and half his games on 2023 where he's really off. And that's a concern. He's really hot and cold on game film. Again, looks the part. The positives I have on Drake Maye: comfortable in the pocket, polished technician, spring in a step in the pocket, quick, urgent tempo. Again, going back to that drummer concept, like leading the timing of an offense. He has that down in fancy ball handling. He's a guy that's very downfield minded. I love that in a quarterback. I love that in Jordan Love in a quarterback. He is aggressive. He wants to attack the field. The secondary is downfield, navigates the pocket well, tough, poised, will stare down the barrel of the pass rush and smile. I mean, that's something I really like about this guy. Strong arm, accurate, rolling out either direction, spreads the ball around, kind of like Josh Allen in Buffalo. He's always spreading the ball over the field. Defenses are chasing their own tails. Dynamic ability to improvise. I like that about him too. Everybody talks about Caleb Williams. Well, Drake Maye, he can do a little off platform too. He can. I think he threw a touchdown pass left-handed, if I recall, when I watched game film. I mean, this guy's got that improvised way of being. Another huge plus about Drake Maye, we touched on with Alex there about the Jayden Daniels deep ball. Drake Maye is something to write home about when it comes to the deep ball. He's got a good one. I chart started 58%, 23 out of 40 attempts deep in 2023 on film. So, I mean, what's the problem? And I just keep going back to, in 2022 and 2023, to me, he had on a consistent basis, right? Not just the one-off, the big play, but it was very average overall downfield ball placement, not good, not great, but average. I think his ball placement was actually, better in 2022. I think he regressed in 2023 in that area. And his completion percentage confirms that, falling from 66.2% down to 63.3%. Here's the main issue I have with Drake Maye, and the biggest concern and fear I have with him is that I saw on his 2023 film, I saw a frustration come out of him on film. It kind of popped a vibe of frustration. I saw an inward anger come out of him on film that really concerns me, because when he first came into college football, there were, there were some expectations, but not a lot. 2023, there was a lot of expectations. So we're starting to talk about the draft. Is he the guy? Is it Caleb Williams? Who is it? And as the expectations and the buzz and the noise started to increase, I noticed he started pressing his passes even more, which caused issues with his ball placement downfield. What's the fear and the concern here? The fear and concern is now we're going to the NFL. Now we're going into a top 5 situation. And we all know what that's like. We've seen Zach Wilson fold like a tent. And now we're in that situation where the expectations are even higher, the pressure's even higher. Let's get it done. Let's go. We're working with all new people. The whole team's new. And to me, it's like, okay, so if this trend continues, if he doesn't, and I worry because of his nature, if he does, I have a first-round grade on Maye. I put my chips on the table on him. He's my QB5 at this point. But if he doesn't turn around and the pressure and the expectations become too much for him, we could see him slide into a Sam Howell, into a Mitch Trubisky. We could see him slide, into that abyss and not come back.
Yeah, so I'll throw my take out for Drake Maye in a second, and then also I want to hit on 2 other quarterbacks, and I'll give my brief kind of overview on them. For Drake Maye, I see a lot of Justin Fields. You kind of referenced not Justin Fields, Justin Herbert.
Okay.
I see a lot of Justin Herbert in Drake Maye. I know you guys, Anthony likes the Josh Allen comp. I think that Josh Allen's a better runner and improviser, but I do think that Drake Maye has like a Daniel Jones downfield ball. It's like not that much touch. It's a laser beam. He throws lasers, and I like that about him because he's got a sick arm. But I love the Jayden Daniels deep ball because of the touch. A little bit different of a style. But I think his poise and his stance, like he just looks like that. He has his head up, like he kind of plays like with his chest up in that Justin Herbert style. And he's got like a cannon, if he gets out of that pocket and he finds someone, he'll freaking sling, as you said, with pressure in his face. So I like that about Drake Maye too. I see the upside there. The other 2 players I wanted to hit on, JJ McCarthy and Caleb Williams. So JJ McCarthy, we've had a lot of discussion about JJ McCarthy. A lot of people point to the tools, and I see the tools. I just don't like that Michigan's offense did not rely on him. People say, you won a national championship. Yeah, you threw 10 passes in the national championship game. How are we really supposed to evaluate that?
Good point.
And say like, oh, okay, he's a winner, but like, did he do a lot of it? Blake Corum was the primary. Their offensive line is sick. Their defense is top notch. He had a lot working. If you want to use the LSU foundation for Jayden Daniels, you got to also point to the foundation that Michigan gave to JJ McCarthy, and also Harbaugh. Now he's gone to the Chargers. Harbaugh helped JJ McCarthy, kind of built a scheme that protected him. And I don't know how, being exposed to a scheme that asks him to throw the ball a lot in the NFL, you're going to have to do that. If you're down a score and you need to march down the field, you can't rely on your offensive line and running game to do it all the time. Giants tried to do that with Saquon Barkley, and it was not sustainable. So I do believe, with JJ McCarthy, you kind of pointed to the idea of some players need time to develop. I think he needs a couple of years to get to where he needs to be. He's 20 years old. He's young. I get that. I get his tools. I think he's a fine 2nd-round pick, in my opinion. I would take a flyer on him there. I wouldn't go 1st round because I think he does need a lot of time. And in the Giants case, they don't have the time to wait for him to get there. They need someone that's going to come in and make an impact right now. Their offensive line isn't good enough to protect him, good enough to establish that run game early on. So that way he's protected, and can kind of go through those inconsistencies. He's going to need more volume for me to be convinced he can throw the ball effectively like that. I do see the tools though. For Caleb Williams, I think that there are major red flags about him being caught up in the bright lights of New York, and him being kind of swayed into this, like, falls out of, like, it's not all about football. It's about his brand. It's about this. I'll never forget watching, rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins, but I'll never forget his face when Washington took him and he looked depressed. And I was like, wow, okay, like, he's definitely not worried about football in that case. And, looking at, obviously, Caleb Williams, I feel I'm a little bit scared of that. He's got pictures hanging up on his walls of himself. He's, I get he's probably very egotistical and he, has a right to be. But, Anthony and I have discussed this a lot. Caleb Williams is really great off script, but in rhythm, in the pocket, I am a little bit concerned about his ability there. But again, he has some of those tools you just can't find every day. So if a team is willing to try to, build those things up, I understand why he's going to be the consensus number one overall pick. But, I'll get your take on JJ McCarthy first and foremost.
Absolutely. By the way, thank you for giving me one more red flag to add to the pile of them I have around Caleb Williams. I had no idea, Alex, he had pictures of himself up at his house. That does not surprise me. I remember a movie like that. I think I saw something where there was some guy that was, I think Cam Newton did it too. I don't remember for sure, but that thank you. I appreciate that. That's good intel. Good pre-draft intel. JJ McCarthy. Yeah. You hit on a lot of the points again. I think we see these players similarly, and scouting's not that hard. I mean, we're all watching the games. It's just about watching the games and knowing what works and doesn't work in the NFL. And I appreciate everything you're saying, Alex, because I think that Michigan did cover up a lot for him. I think you're right about that. I think that Jim Harbaugh, I think I'll go ahead and say it out loud, had a little bit of agenda pushing JJ McCarthy a little harder than normal. And he should have, with all the generational, carefully worded talk that he gave in the preseason, where he wasn't really saying he was generational talent wise, but generational as far as quote unquote leadership, et cetera, those type of things. So, but of course the media took that and ran with it, that this guy's generational, and I see the developmental side you're talking about. I'm a little bit lower on JJ McCarthy, and it's interesting you talk about him and Caleb Williams, like we're going to touch on in a minute. But to me, if I'm a general manager, if I have two choices, my owner comes in and says, okay, you got two choices here, Daniel. You can either draft JJ McCarthy or we can trade for Zach Wilson. And I'm Zach Wilson's biggest critic. I'm the guy who came out pre-draft and said he'd be a bust if he was taking the first 3 rounds. The only guy probably out there that said that. If the owner comes in and says that to me, I'm trading for Zach Wilson opposed to drafting JJ McCarthy. I'm that low on him. I'm that guy that has a 5th round grade on JJ McCarthy. To me, guys, he's like watching paint dry. When I watch the game film, and I've watched 23 games, hours I'll never get back in my life. I've watched 23 hours of 23 games rather, JJ McCarthy, more like probably 120 hours if I add it up. But it's just, to me, it's like when I watched him, I mean, we're talking about a guy who is a master of dink and dunk football. I mean, that's what he is on game film. This guy, I think, rated on ESPN number 51 in the nation behind a bunch of guys I don't even know. And I do this 17 hours a day, 6 days a week. As far as total passing yards for the season, 2,630 yards, I believe, on the season total. So a lot of dink and dunk. And just like we saw with Zach Wilson and with the Jets, with that type of thing, the ball is all over the road with JJ McCarthy. Short passes. It looks like he's skipping rocks sometimes in a pond. Intermediate passes, the placement's not where it needs to be. And don't get me started, about his deep game. What deep game? One of the least explosive players I've ever evaluated on game film. I think he took like maybe 13 deep shots I charted in 13 games, and I think half of those were incomplete. And that's a big part of playing quarterback. We talk about Jayden Daniels, we talk about Drake Maye pushing the ball downfield, deep passes. That's not JJ McCarthy. JJ McCarthy is a methodical game manager. And he's a guy that's a good guy. I'm not trying to take anything away from him. He's probably a great locker room presence, great guy. You bring him as a backup quarterback. You pray your starter never gets hurt. Guy that inspires everybody, runs the scout team. All those things are great about JJ McCarthy. But it's just there's a lot of very scary things to me about McCarthy. This is a guy that if you've ever seen the movie Jaws, right? This guy gets swallowed by the pass rush in the pocket at times. He's a guy that's too hyper, struggles setting his feet in the pocket, which screws up the timing, inconsistent release times. He's got rigid mechanics. Reminds me of Kenny Pickett that way. Elementary route tree. Struggled to read defenses. I felt ball can get wobbly at times, kind of like Trey Lance when we saw that ball wobble in the air. He's a guy that's just scary, and there's upside to him too. There's always upside and downside about these guys. He's a tough, athletic guy. He's a guy that he can run around. He can flow with the pocket to a certain level. He can move around. He's best probably when he's moving. When he's rolling out on that. To me, that's when he's at his best. But there's just a lot of red flags. Not from a character standpoint. I think to me, I see what Jim Harbaugh saw in J.J. McCarthy. He saw himself. He's just back when he played for the Bears and the Colts. Only he's nowhere near as good. And I think that, he's a guy that could have played in a leather helmet back in the day. I mean, he's tough as nails. I mean, but no, not for the dynamics the two of you have described today, as far as needing somebody to come. I mean, it's either Daniel Jones, right? Or somebody that can come in and make an instant, it's like oatmeal, just add water. Somebody that can come in and just actually do it right off the bat. And that is absolutely positively, in my mind, not JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, so I'll agree with you on that one. I do think, and Alex and I have been saying this on the channel for a while now, JJ McCarthy needs a lot of time to bake. Like, he does need more time to develop. So I think we're all in agreement on that one. But I want to circle back to the other half of what Alex was mentioning there. I know that you're pretty vocal on Twitter, and you just mentioned it, all the red flags. You're anti-Caleb Williams. I think he's the most polarizing player in this draft, because you have people who claim he's the next Mahomes. You have others like yourself who claim he'll never even see that type of potential. It's a broad spectrum of opinions here with Caleb Williams. I see a lot of the red flags. I see a lot of the green flags. The arm is sick. The off-script ability is sick. It's hard to evaluate him. He plays in a Lincoln Riley offense. It's hard to see it with his poor footwork. He gets really flat-footed, and then he'll make all these ridiculous throws off timing because of his poor footwork. There's a lot to like with him. There's a lot to really dislike with him. So I want to get a scout's perspective and ask you, what is it that you see in Caleb Williams? Because I know that you're low on him. What is it that really makes you apprehensive to the idea of Caleb Williams in the NFL?
Yeah, absolutely. And you make a lot of good points, Anthony. To me, and I've studied Caleb Williams now in every snap he's taken in 2022 and 2023, just to cover all my bases. And in my report, my article I put on the site, I said Caleb Williams is a bust. I'm pushing all my chips up on this one. And I do agree with you, Anthony. He is the most polarizing player we've seen in this draft. And I think really over the last, he's a more polarizing player than Trevor Lawrence even was. I think people look at Caleb Williams as even more of a generational prospect, from what they say, than even, Lawrence at that point. To me, there's just a plethora. There's more questions that I have than answers, and the answers I do have, I don't like on Caleb Williams. 6'1", 215 pounds. I have a 4th round grade on him. That's what the game film says that he is. And the reasons why is, just for starters, we talk about expectations in New York. Expectations for this guy are going to be just like crazy. I mean, if he doesn't come in there with a cape and actually take off from the ground, he's probably, not going to make it to begin with, because unmet expectations are the source of everyone, their disappointment. So to me, the big concerns, though, besides all the, just the things we're talking about, for starters, and even PFF acknowledges this, just a really slow time to throw. That's a big one on Caleb Williams. 3.21 seconds. That is... that's if you look at next gen stats, the slowest in the NFL is Justin Fields at 3.23 seconds. So that's what we're kind of getting ourselves into here. On tape, he looks to me like nothing more than a glorified system quarterback. This is a guy I charted every single short pass that he threw during the season, took the time to do so. And he's best when he's really throwing, between 44 and 62% of his game planning is his game, that throws on a short level. When he throws under 44% short passes in a game, he really gets exposed at the intermediate to deep levels. His completion rates drop down to between about 55 and 57.5% against really subpar teams in college football. Not a big game quarterback. That's another huge one. That's what, scouts will talk about in draft rooms and teams will talk about. 2-9 against ranked teams. That's a huge concern. Another concern: 32 fumbles in 36 games, which I think leads the country. Reckless with the ball running around. Post-game conduct, refused to shake hands with Utah. Sportsmanship, where is it? Refused to talk to reporters after the UCLA game. And he gets reckless when he's running. He's another guy like Drake Maye, like Jayden Daniels, that thinks he's, Jerome Bettis and not a quarterback, and he'll just take on guys, so that's a huge risk as well. And really, he's inexperienced by his own admission dealing with adversity. This is a situation where, he was, quoted, coming out after the season, where he said, he's never really been in these situations. And I quote, where I'm 7-5, there's no playoff hopes at the end of the season. I'm dealing with it emotionally, spiritually, and physically. The guy's not used to adversity. He's not used to getting hit in the face with situations. And so that could be an issue. And then the Holiday Bowl, that's another one that really stuck out to me. I mean, Miller Moss comes in there, and I didn't even know who Miller Moss was. I had no idea. And like I said, this is all I do. And he comes in there and, he ends up, beating a ranked team, and he ties Caleb Williams' career high in college with 6 touchdown passes. And the guy just came out of the blue. The things you pointed to, Anthony, are all true. Again, like you guys are pointing out, all the things you guys are seeing are all there. He has the elite arm strength, athleticism, the ability to improvise, the ability, just a sick abilities you talked about to create and extend. It's almost laughable. It's almost comical watching him. It's like watching you're controlling a joystick of a video game. The guys just, the defenders are just lunging at each other. It's like watching Barry Sanders. And he does. There's just a lot of things. He's also improved on his ball security this year. He's throwing less PBUs, pass breakups. But, at the end of the day, this comes down to throwing the football as a quarterback. And to me, the time to throw, the average downfield ball placement, and really what's going on, we talked about at the top of the show, what's going on from the neck up really, really, really concerns me because, we all saw him break down. Yeah, I think what we saw in Caleb Williams down the stretch is I think we saw him have a borderline mental breakdown. That's what I think we saw. And when he collapsed in his mother's arms and he bawled in front of a TV audience in a stadium full of people, and his body language was bad after in press conferences. I watched the press conferences. He looked aloof. He did not look like he wanted to be there. And it's just a lot of huge concerns because really at the end of the day, we're asking a guy to come in, like we talked about, to lead a locker room full of multimillionaires. We're looking at a guy coming in to represent a team and represent a city. And I do not at all see somebody who is prepared to do that in the National Football League.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really laid out the concerns there quite well for Caleb Williams. And it's tough. I think a lot of fans will get the blinders on and read generational tags and labels for him and get super excited. But it's important not to get short-sighted and take a full look at the picture here and see that there are a lot of flaws, as you just pointed out. And I know we're going a little over, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. But if I can squeeze in one last take from you
Sure.
on a prospect, I'd love to hear about Spencer Rattler. I've seen you talk about him on Twitter, and I know that you're really high on Spencer Rattler in comparison to the rest of the NFL draft community. So if you could throw in your take on him before we wrap up, that would be great.
Absolutely. I've loved Spencer Rattler since the first time I laid eyes on him in 2020 game film when he was at Oklahoma. This guy, to me, is always reminded me of kind of a mix between Brett Favre and Patrick Mahomes, and it's just – I love the moxie this guy has. I love his tenacity. I love how he how he plays the game more than anything. I mean, he's got super fast reflexes when he's in the pocket. He moves around. He plays with a big chip on his shoulder. He's a tough guy that's extremely competitive. That's I like that a lot about him. He's athletic. He's got, he's poised. Good short game. Good, rolling out. Doing that kind of thing, moving around, which of course is a trend in the National Football League. And, he's very experienced. He's throwing for a lot of yards. And I think he's really improved in 2023 on his decision making. And also, too, is extremely impressive. I see. And that's something I really look at, how these guys are responding to situations. Obviously, Caleb Williams and him both at Oklahoma, they went their separate ways. Rattler goes down to South Carolina, and this last season was borderline miraculous to me what he ended up accomplishing. This is a guy that was playing on the number 72 ranked South Carolina Gamecocks. Preseason Sports Illustrated had them, had their strength of schedule ranked as the toughest schedule in the country. He's a guy that, the offensive line was in a shambles. It's well documented. Really, Juice Wells went on week 2. And the only receiver he really had was Leggett. And, they came on reported he had a bum ankle since week 2 as well. His top number 2 and 3 receiver, I believe, on the team was a tight end. He had the number 128 ranked running game in the country out of 132 teams. And yet he still ended up with a higher completion percentage than Caleb Williams. So to me, it's like this guy really had it going on. And also, too, here's another thing that really impresses me about Spencer Rattler. And I think that this is something that a lot of people don't spend a lot of time on, on mainstream media, et cetera, or even on social media, is that, we never really, everybody's all that Netflix thing. We always, but since then, we really haven't heard a lot out of Spencer Rattler in the media. And he had every right to gripe. I mean, this is a guy that was, when he got benched against Texas in 2021 in favor of Caleb Williams, he was 5-0 coming off a bowl win. He was completing 76.9% of his passes. This is a guy that had every right to go into the media and just absolutely just like, hey, that's not fair. I mean, we all seen it. We've seen all these guys around, football, they complain every chance they get. They wipe clear their school from the face of the earth on their social media. He had chances to do all these types of different things, and he never did them. He never said anything bad. He never talked bad. He still doesn't. And everybody who talks around Spencer Rattler talks very positively about him, from his head coach to the different, the reserve offensive lineman that stepped in, how he's helpful. He's doing this, that, the other. He's a guy who's doing his playing, is talking with his playing. And that to me is extremely mature from a quarterback. And that's somebody that tells me that doesn't demand respect, but somebody who can command a locker room. And that's a big part of this because, like we talked about, God rest his soul, Dwayne Haskins, he had that look of just, and then, of course, we saw it in Washington. They would hardly help him when he got sacked up off the ground. You know what I mean? But this is a guy who kind of, commands that respect, and command a locker room, shows tremendous maturity, and also can make all the platform throws and run around and do all those kind of things too. So to me, that's why he's my QB1 in the 2024 NFL draft, because he shows the characteristics of transfer. Great college quarterbacks don't always make great NFL quarterbacks. It's about finding guys the best of your ability. Again, we talked about there's more variables to this than picking the right numbers for the Powerball, but it's about at least you can hedge yourself. You can make calculated, educated guesses. It's not like Colin Cowherd said when he talked about Trey Lance, my take on Trey Lance. It's just everyone's just, you're just guessing basically, or whatever, he said, it just comes down to guessing. It's not just guessing. There's calculated ways that you can really, you can take a gamble on these guys, and you're looking for things like, time to throw. Does he go through his progressions? What's his downfield ball placement like? What's his ball security like? How are guys responding to him? Like we talked about, Alex, at the Senior Bowl and stuff. How are guys responding? What's his leadership like? What's he saying in social media? What's he posting on social media? And yes, teams do have a scout now. Most teams have a guy who just, or a woman who just basically scours these guys' social media, looking for things that are red flags. They're looking for drug activity. They're looking for gang affiliations. They're looking for, criminal type of things or concerns, like Will Levis, like Maye, mayonnaise a little too much, or eating the banana. You turn on Will Levis's social media and he's eating the banana with the peel on it. And he's definitely afraid, so-called, of milk. And the guys all have milk at the trading table. What's the guy going to do? Is he going to run and hide? So you're looking at things in social media too, but Spencer Rattler seems to have it going on from the neck up, and he definitely has it going on from an arm talent standpoint.
Yeah, I love the perspective that you gave there, especially on how teams really do scour social medias. And again, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just want to say, like, the analysis there on Spencer Rattler and really on all of the quarterbacks has been great. I love the insight and really do appreciate you coming on. Would love to have you on again sometime soon leading up to the draft, but really just want to say thank you for sharing your time with us and giving us some really great NFL scouting insight on these draft prospects.
You're very welcome, Anthony and Alex. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your show. I love talking about this stuff. My wife actually is happy when I get on shows like this because she doesn't have to hear about me. Hey, honey, let me tell you, she doesn't want to hear any more about Caleb Williams. She doesn't want to hear any more about Spencer Rattler. She's like, I think CBS Sports put something on about me and Spencer Rattler, and they talked about what I saw in his eyes. She's like, I don't want to hear any more about that. So it's great being on with you guys. I really appreciate it. Would love to be back on. Love talking about the draft. To me, is the most exciting time of the year. It's Super Bowl Junior to me, and the thing I love most about it is it gives hope to fans of every team.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much again. Really had a great time speaking with you. And to all the viewers, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment down below your thoughts on all those quarterback prospects. Make sure to show Dan some love and go follow him on Twitter/X at FirstRoundMock and check out his scouting profiles on FirstRoundMock.com. And we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody.